In this video, I'm going to show you how I lesson planned in a very organized and efficient way, a system that I developed that worked for me that I'm hoping would also work for you. My name is Rosanna from efficiencyandorganization.com. I am a public school administrator and a former award-winning teacher. For me, when I used to lesson plan, I felt like it was taking just way too much time. Like the planning aspect of it was just so time consuming. And so I came up with a system that I actually learned in my credentialing program. It's a 7-step process that I used for every lesson to keep myself super organized and efficient when delivering lessons. And I'll show you what they look like, but basically they all begin with a warm-up. So this is an excellent classroom management strategy. What you want to do is have some kind of an activity, some kind of a warm-up for the students to do no matter what subject area you're teaching, even if it's PE. So that way, as soon as they come in, they know what to do. It's very nicely flowed. It's like imagine having a party in your home. When people come in, you want them to have like some kind of a structure to follow, right? Because otherwise they come in, they're like, where do I go? Where do I put my bags? Then it's kind of like you're giving that power to them to decide what they're doing, whereas you can take that power in your hands because you are dealing with kids, and that way you can decide for them what you want them to do as soon as they walk in. Then next would be the introduction. So this is very important, and in all honesty, this is the part that I used to skip out on a lot, but then I learned that I shouldn't do that. It's just not good because see, what happens is I used to be questioned a lot, like especially in trigonometry and pre-calculus when I used to teach. The students would say, well, why am I even learning this? And that's what the introduction does. See, it kind of helps us in 1 or 2 minutes to try to introduce them, tie what they're learning to something that's real world. So let's talk about the lesson delivery part of it. Lesson delivery, this is where we're either going to use like an inquiry-based approach or we're going to do the direct instruction. And this is a critical time when it comes to the timing of it. Because a lot of times what happens is we find ourselves talking way too much in this part of the lesson. And so that's the one thing I had to learn about myself too as a teacher was how do I make sure I keep it within a 15-20 minute time frame so that way I don't run out of time. Because the next section is the checking understanding. This is so critical. The checking understanding is, okay, so let's say they learn the lesson. Did they really learn it? So we have to come up with like a question or 2 questions, some way to kind of get a feel to see if majority, a good 70-80% of the students, if not more, understood what you were trying to get across to them. The checking for understanding part, I think that's critical because you could catch some of the most common misconceptions, some of the most common problems, misunderstandings, and that way you nip them in the bud as early as possible, because if you don't check and they go and they do the independent practice without really understanding the material correctly, they're gonna make too many mistakes. It's gonna defeat the purpose of us teaching the lesson. So this is where we could catch those things as early as possible. You have to do check understanding the way that it works for you, for your content area, but come up with something, some way where you can check to make sure they got it before they start doing the work. After checking for understanding comes the guided practice section. And the guided practice, this is where I think a lot of teachers do this, but they give the assignment to the students and then they just kind of go and they basically tell the students, if you have questions, come see me. I don't think that that's that effective. It certainly wasn't effective for me because chances are 90% of them will not come to you. So this is a good time to walk around the class and see what the students are writing, what they're drawing, what they're putting together, if they're making posters, whatever the guided practice is. But this should be about 15-20 minutes, however much time is left for the lesson, so that way they could really get that practice down before you go to the next section, which is the independent study. The independent study, a lot of times teachers leave it for homework. They just figure, okay, we'll just give it to them to do at home since it's independent. That's great. You can do that. You don't have to have it as part of your lesson. But the independent practice part, what you want to do is make sure you assign them something and make sure you check it. So that way, again, checking, you're making sure that you're catching their mistakes before it gets becomes test time. Because when it's test time, when you're examining them and you come to learn that they didn't learn something, then that's when it's like, oh man, I wish I had caught it early on. And then the last part is the closing, and the closing is where it's just 1 or 2 minutes, but a lot of us, me definitely included, when I didn't have time for that, for the closing, and then all of a sudden the bell would ring, or all of a sudden I have to do the next thing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there were some important things I wanted to say that I didn't say. I didn't remind about the homework, I didn't remind about the quiz coming up, whatever it may be. So the closing just kind of puts it all together, and you can even remind them. The closing is a really good time to go back to the objective. In fact, when I was doing my templates, this was like my 5th year of teaching, whenever I would write the objective on my slide on PowerPoint, I would also put it at the end. So that way it helped to like remind them what we learned that day, what we learned in that lesson. So if you have like, let's say an hour to spend on a lesson, whatever lesson it might be, a good way to divide it up would be maybe the warm-ups could be 5 minutes, the introduction could be 2 minutes, the presentation or the part where their actual learning is happening could be like 18 to 20 minutes, checking for understanding could be 5 to 7 minutes, maybe the guided practice could be about 20 to 23 minutes, and the closing, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, depending on the lesson. And the only other thing I want to show you is when I saved my PowerPoint slides, I would save them by date. So then the following year, all I had to do was go and open it up again, make some tweaks, make adjustments, make improvements, and then I'm ready to present that to this new group of students. If I'm teaching that same content again, if I'm teaching the same material the following year. If you get a chance to go on the website, you'll be able to see the article. You could subscribe right on the page. I share information like a resource newsletter once a month, and I have a lot of really good tips and techniques on how to be organized, how to do things more efficiently, how to achieve more in life in more systematic ways. So that might help you to sign up, so subscribe there. You can also subscribe to the channel because I have 6 focus areas where I write and share information on. I thank you for being with me, and I will catch you in the next video.